My sister Renee grabbed her keys off the hook by the door and told me she'd be back in 20 minutes. She just needed more paint and something for dinner, she said. And then she was gone. The door clicked shut, and it was only Camille and me in the half-finished living room. Camille smiled at me, the kind of smile that meant she'd already decided something. "Let's play a game," she said. "Close your eyes." I laughed, but I closed them. The room went gold and quiet behind my eyelids. Then she leaned in, so close I felt her breath against my ear, and whispered, "I wish I had done this sooner." I didn't open my eyes. I didn't want the moment to end. Let me back up, because that moment didn't come out of nowhere, even if it felt that way to me at the time. My name is Desmond Hayes. I'm 34 years old, and I restore old houses in Atlanta for a living. Craftsman bungalows, brick Tudors, the kind of homes people drive past and assume are beyond saving. I take them apart down to the bones and I put them back together the way they were meant to stand. I like the work because it's honest. A wall is either level or it isn't. A joint either holds or it doesn't. Wood doesn't lie to you, and it doesn't leave. The house I live in is one I restored myself. It took me the better part of 3 years, most of it done on weekends and long evenings after the paying jobs were finished. I chose every board, sanded every rail, matched the trim by hand. For a while, it was the thing I was proudest of in the world. Then, 10 months ago, it became the emptiest place I'd ever stood in. I'm divorced. The papers were finalized 8 months ago, though the marriage had been over long before anyone signed anything. Her name was Bianca. We didn't have children, which people always tell me is a blessing, and maybe it is, but on the quiet nights it just meant there was no one else in the rooms. She left me for a man named Trevor, packed 2 suitcases and most of the noise in the house, and drove off into a life I wasn't invited to. What she left behind was silence, and I got very good at living inside it. The record player in the corner had gone gray with dust. I used to play something every evening while I cooked, and I used to cook almost every night. After she left, I stopped doing both. The turntable sat under its plastic cover like a thing in a museum, and the kitchen went cold. I'd stand at the counter with a mug of coffee. I'd let go lukewarm and tell myself this was fine. This was just a season. A man is allowed a quiet stretch. Renee didn't buy it. She's my older sister, and she has never once bought anything. I tried to sell her about being fine. She called almost every day. I let most of those calls slide into voicemail, then felt guilty. Then called back at hours. I knew she'd be busy, so we could both pretend we'd tried. She saw right through that too. "You don't have to talk," she told me one evening, standing in my doorway with her arms crossed. "Just let her fix the light in there. You used to love that room. It's just a house, Renee," I said. She looked at me for a long moment, and her voice dropped, the way it does when she's about to say something she means. "It stopped being just a house the day you stopped playing music in it." The her Renee meant was Camille. Camille was Renee's closest friend, had been for years, and she worked as an interior stylist, the kind of person who could walk into a dead room and know exactly which 3 things were killing it. Renee had it all worked out before she even asked me. Camille was between studio projects. My living room was a wreck of half-stripped walls and furniture shoved into corners. It was practical. It made sense. Let the friend with the good eye help the brother who couldn't seem to lift himself out of the fog. I said no twice. On the third ask, I was too tired to keep saying it, so I said fine. She could come by on Saturday and take a look, and that was the whole of it as far as I understood it. I told myself she came because Renee asked her to. I know now that wasn't the whole reason. She knew it too. But that Saturday, when I opened the door and found Camille standing on my porch with a tote bag of paint swatches and a level tucked under her arm, all I saw was my sister's friend showing up to do my sister a favor. I didn't see anything else. I want to be honest about that, because everything that came after depends on how completely I missed what was standing right in front of me. Camille came back the next Saturday, and the one after that, and soon it wasn't a favor with an end date anymore. It was just a thing that happened in my week. She'd show up in the late afternoon, most days, when the light was going long and gold across the floor. We'd pull furniture away from the walls, tape off the trim, roll primer until our shoulders ached. She was easy to be around in a way I hadn't expected. She didn't fill the silence for the sake of filling it. She worked, and she let me work. And somewhere in there, the fog I'd been living in started to thin without my noticing. She noticed things. That was the first thing I learned about her. Not the big things people notice to seem thoughtful, but the small ones that tell you someone has actually been paying attention. The second afternoon, she turned my reading chair a quarter turn toward the window and stepped back to look at it. "There," she said. "You look out when you think. The chair should let you." I hadn't told her that. I didn't even know it about myself until she said it out loud, and then I couldn't unknow it. That happened more than once. She'd move a lamp 6 inches and a corner I'd hated for a year would suddenly make sense. She'd suggest a color and I'd resist it and then live with it for 3 days and admit she'd been right the whole time. She never asked about Bianca. Most people couldn't help themselves. They'd get halfway through a sentence about the divorce and catch the look on my face and trail off, and the trailing off was almost worse than the question. Camille just didn't go there. She treated the house like a house, not like a crime scene. And she treated me like a man doing a project, not like a man to be handled. I hadn't realized how much I needed that until I had it. There were small moments that snagged on me, though I couldn't have told you why at the time. Once we were carrying a heavy framed print across the room, each of us with a corner, and my hand slid along the top edge and found hers already there. We both stopped. For a second, neither of us moved. And then we both pulled back at the same time and laughed it off, and went on pretending the print was heavier than it was. I thought about it that night, longer than a thing like that should make you think. Renee stopped by sometimes to check on us, or that's what she said she was doing. Mostly, she stood in the doorway with a look on her face I couldn't read, watching the two of us work, a small private smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. When I caught her at it, she'd suddenly become very interested in a paint can or a text on her phone. I didn't think much of it. I think about it a lot now. Then there was the record. We were sorting a box of things I'd been meaning to throw out for the better part of a year. The kind of box that follows you from room to room precisely because you can't bring yourself to open it. Old cables, a broken lamp, a stack of vinyl I hadn't touched since the turntable went dark. Camille was working through the records one at a time, reading the labels. When she went still, she was holding a worn 45, a single with a plain sleeve gone soft at the corners. And she just stopped, the way you stop when something reaches out of the past and puts a hand on your shoulder. "Come around again." She read off the label, quiet, almost to herself. "You can toss that one," I said. I don't even remember buying it. She didn't toss it. She held it a beat too long, then set it carefully aside, apart from the discard pile, apart from everything. "Why that one?" I asked. "You keep circling it. Some songs know you before you know them," she said. "That's not an answer." She smiled, but there was something underneath the smile I couldn't reach. "Hand me the level," she said. "This shelf is off by a hair." And just like that, we were back to the wall, and the moment folded itself away. And I let it, because I didn't know yet that it was the whole story sitting there in a soft paper sleeve. Every sign was there. That's the part I have to keep saying, because it's true and because I lived it and still didn't see it. She wiped the dust off that 45 with the hem of her shirt and stood it up on the shelf where the light would catch it. And neither of us reached over to drop the needle. It just stood there, waiting. And I told myself it was only a record, and she was only kind. And that was all it was. I caught myself, around that time, listening for her car. I'd be up on a ladder or crouched over the baseboards, and I'd hear an engine slow at the curb, and something in my chest would lift before I'd even decided to feel it. Then it would be the neighbor's truck, and the lift would settle, and I'd tell myself I was only glad for the help. The house was coming back to life around me, board by board, color by color, and I kept believing the house was the only thing changing. The evenings got easier. We'd finish a section of wall and stand back and just look at it, side by side, not saying much. The smell of fresh paint sharp and clean over the older smell of pine and sawdust. There was a glass of water she always left half-finished on the coffee table, a ring of condensation on the glass every single time, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I never wiped it away until after she'd gone. The room was warmer than it had been in a year. I thought that was the paint. I was the last person in that room to understand what it actually was. There was one evening in particular. We'd been at it for hours, and the light had gone from gold to that deep amber it gets right before it quits for the day. Camille was cross-legged on the floor, sorting screws into a jar, and I was on the ladder finishing the last edge of the far wall. Neither of us had spoken in a while, and it wasn't an awkward quiet. It was the other kind, the kind that only settles between people who are comfortable saying nothing. Then she said my name. Just Desmond. Soft. Like the start of something. I looked down at her, brush still in my hand, and she was looking up at me with an expression I didn't have a name for yet. Her mouth opened. Whatever she'd been about to say, I could see the shape of it forming, could see it mattered. And then she pressed her lips together and looked back down at the jar of screws. Nothing, she said. It can wait. I asked her what. She just shook her head and smiled that smile again, the one with the whole world folded behind it. And I told myself to leave it alone. I was good at leaving things alone by then, but that one I turned over for days. The way you worry a splinter you can't quite get a grip on. Looking back, I wonder how many times she came right up to the edge of telling me and stepped back. How many nothings she handed me. How many almosts. She was patient in a way I didn't recognize at the time. I thought she was just quiet. I know now that quiet and patient aren't the same thing. That one is a temperament and the other is a decision you make over and over. And she was making it every single afternoon in my living room while I stood there sanding a rail and understanding none of it. She'd leave around dark, most nights. She'd gather her things, and there'd be a beat at the door where it felt like the evening wanted to be something more than it had been. And then she'd say goodnight and I'd say drive safe, and that was that. I'd stand in the doorway and watch her taillights go, and the house behind me would be a little warmer than the day before, and I'd tell myself again that it was only the paint. It was a Tuesday when Bianca came back. I remember because Tuesdays had become the good days, the days Camille usually came by, and I'd started measuring my week against them. I heard the car first, then the heels on the walk. That quick, sharp rhythm I'd have known anywhere. I opened the door before she knocked, and there she was, Bianca, standing on the porch I'd rebuilt with my own hands, wearing a look like no time had passed at all. A wave of perfume rolled in ahead of her, the expensive kind she always wore too much of, and it landed in my newly painted rooms like something spilled. "Well," she said, stepping past me without being asked, her eyes already moving over the walls. "Look at you. Somebody's been busy." She ran a finger along the fresh trim and made a small sound in her throat. "Whoever talked you into this color did you no favors. It's very beige." It wasn't beige. It was a warm limestone Camille had fought me for and won. But I didn't correct her. I'd learned a long time ago that correcting Bianca only extended the conversation. "Trevor was gone," she told me, folding herself onto my couch like she still lived there. She said it lightly, the way you mention weather, but I could hear the crack under it. It hadn't worked out. She'd made a mistake, she said. She'd been thinking about me, about us, about how good we'd had it before everything got complicated. She talked, and the whole time her eyes kept moving around the room, taking inventory, landing on the half-finished wall, the drop cloths, the level leaning in the corner that wasn't mine. "You've had help," she said. It wasn't a question. "A friend of Renee's," I said. "She's a stylist." Something shifted in Bianca's face then, a sharpening, and I watched her put it together faster than I ever had. She'd always been quick that way, quick about people, about angles, about what a thing could be used for. "A friend of Renee's," she repeated slowly. "That wouldn't be Camille, would it?" I didn't answer. The answer was on my face, and she read it, and something like a smile touched her mouth that had nothing warm in it. I told her, as gently as I could, that there was no us to go back to, that I wished her well, but the door she'd walked out of had closed behind her, and I wasn't the man standing on the other side of it anymore. I meant it. I'd never meant anything more calmly in my life. That was when she reached for the knife. "You really don't know," she said, and she laughed, low and delighted, like she'd been handed a gift. "Oh, Desmond, you always were the last one to figure anything out." She stood, smoothing her dress. "You think she's here to help? Out of the goodness of her heart? Ask her how long she's wanted you. Go on, ask her." "Since Renee's wedding, Desmond. Years. She's not decorating a house. She's working you. She's been waiting for exactly this. For you to be broken enough and lonely enough to fall for it. And she walked right in the second I walked out. I told her that was enough." My voice didn't sound like mine. "I came back," Bianca said, gathering her purse, "and I found her playing house in my house." "It hasn't been your house for a while," I said. "Fine." She was at the door now, and she turned, and she delivered it clean, the way she delivered everything she'd rehearsed. But ask her why she really came. Ask her straight, and watch her face when she answers. You'll see it. You'll see I'm right. And then she was gone, the door slamming hard enough that the whole wall shivered, and on the shelf the little 45 trembled in its sleeve and went still. I stood in the middle of that room for a long time. Here's the thing I'm not proud of. The poison worked, at least a little, because that's what poison does when it has a grain of truth folded into it. Because I could feel that it wasn't entirely a lie. I thought about the way Camille had gone still holding that record. The almosts, the nothing it can wait. The way she noticed things about me no favor for a friend required her to notice. Bianca had taken something real and bent it into a shape meant to cut. And the terrible thing about a bent true thing is that the true part still gleams. My phone started going off that night. Bianca, one message after another. Reconsider. Call me. You know I'm right about her. I didn't answer. But I didn't delete them either. And I hate that I didn't. I didn't sleep much. I sat in the reading chair Camille had turned toward the window, looking out at a dark yard, running it all backward like a man checking his own work for a crack. And the trouble was, when I looked at the evidence Bianca had handed me, it held together. Camille had noticed how I sat. She'd known which chair, which color, which corner. She'd never once asked about the divorce, and I'd been grateful for that. But now a colder voice in my head asked why. Because she was kind? Or because she already knew every inch of the wound and was careful not to press it? That's the ugliness of what Bianca did. She didn't invent anything. She didn't have to. She took a set of true and gentle things and lined them up under a bad light, and in that light they looked like a plan. And I, a man who'd been left, a man whose whole job was checking whether things were level and whether they'd hold, discovered I no longer trusted my own eye. If I'd read Bianca so wrong for so many years, how could I trust what I thought I was reading now? The next morning I almost called Renee. I got as far as her name on the screen and stopped, because I didn't know what I'd even ask. Is your friend using me? Did you send her here to fix my walls or to fix me? Both questions felt like a betrayal of something, though I couldn't have told you what. And so I set the phone down and made coffee I didn't drink, and let the day come up gray over a house that no longer felt finished. Camille came by 2 days later, and I couldn't look at her the way I had. She felt it the second she walked in. She always noticed things. She saw the new distance in me before I said a single word, saw me holding myself back, and something in her went quiet and careful, the way you go quiet when you realize the floor might not hold. She asked if everything was okay. I said it was fine. We both knew it wasn't. We worked in a silence that wasn't the good kind anymore. She'd hand me a tool before I asked for it, the way she always had, and I'd take it without meeting her eyes. And every one of those small kindnesses now felt like a question I didn't know how to answer. Once she started to say something, my name again, that same soft opening, and this time I was the one who looked away first. I saw her register it. I saw her decide not to push, and the 45 sat on the shelf between us, catching the last of the light, saying nothing that either of us was brave enough to say out loud. It came to a head on a Thursday, and it started, of all things, with Renee. She'd come by to help for once, actually rolling up her sleeves instead of supervising, and after an hour she announced we were out of primer and low on everything for dinner. She grabbed her keys off the hook. 20 minutes, she said. Don't burn it down. The door clicked shut, and it was only Camille and me in the half-finished living room, and I knew I couldn't hold the question any longer. Camille, I set down the brush. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She went still. She'd known this was coming, I think, since the day I couldn't look at her. She set her own brush across the top of the can and turned to face me, and she didn't reach for anything to do with her hands, which for her was its own kind of surrender. Bianca was here, I said. She told me you've wanted me, since Renee's wedding, that you didn't come here for the house at all, that the whole thing was, I couldn't make myself say the word working, that it wasn't what it looked like. I watched her face the way Bianca had told me to. And here is what Bianca got wrong, what she'd never understand. She told me to watch for the flinch, the guilt of someone caught. But Camille didn't flinch. She looked at me steadily, her eyes filled, and she let them. And there was no guilt in her face at all. Only something carried a very long way and set down at last. She's right, Camille said, about the wanting. She's wrong about everything else. The room went quiet enough to hear the house settle. I've loved you since your sister's wedding, she said. 7 years. We danced once. One song. You probably don't even remember it. You just started seeing Bianca. And I stood at the edge of that dance floor and told myself I'd missed my chance by about a month. And I was too much of a coward to find out if that was even true. Her voice didn't break. It stayed level. And level took everything she had. So I kept the record. That song. 7 years. And when Renee said you needed help with the house, I said yes so fast it scared me. Because I did want to help you. That part is real. And because it was the first time in 7 years I'd have a reason to be near you. That part is real too. Both things can't be true, I said quietly. Because I already knew they could. They're the only things that are true, she said. I didn't come to trick you, Desmond. I came because staying away hurt more than the risk of coming. The help was real. The wanting was real. I never once used one to get the other. I just did the only honest thing I knew how to do, which was show up and hope you might, someday, turn a quarter turn toward the window on your own. And that was the moment the whole thing turned over in my hands and showed me its other side. Bianca had taken this same truth and sharpened it into a weapon, meant to make me afraid of the one person who'd been gentle with me. Camille had held it for 7 years and chosen not to use it at all. One of them came back only when her other option fell through. The other had asked for nothing and stood ready to walk out with her heart in her hands, rather than take a single thing I hadn't offered. There was no contest, and hadn't been for a while. Somewhere in me, a decision that had been forming for weeks finished all at once, quiet and complete. Whatever Bianca was offering, I didn't want it, and never would. I didn't say anything. I couldn't, and the silence went on a beat too long. And then another, and I watched the hope go out of her face, watched her gather it back up inside herself, folding it away the way she'd folded every almost. Okay, she whispered, reaching for her bag. Okay, I shouldn't have. Wait. She stopped. I crossed the room and took her hand before she could lift the bag. My heart was doing something it hadn't done in a long time. I gave her the truth back plainly, because she'd earned it. That I'd been turning toward that window for weeks without knowing why. That the warmest the house had felt all year was every afternoon she was in it. That I didn't want her to fold anything away again. Something broke open in her face, and then, through the tears, she smiled. Because she was Camille, she didn't answer with a speech. She wiped her eyes, pressed a hand flat against my chest, and eased me back. Let's play a game, she said. Close your eyes. I laughed, and I closed them. The room went gold and quiet behind my eyelids. I heard her cross to the shelf, the soft slide of that 45 from its sleeve, the dust cover of a turntable silent for 10 months lifting and settling. Then the warm crackle, a rush of static like a held breath, and the song rose into the room. The one she'd carried for 7 years, and I knew it before the first line. She leaned in close, so close I felt her breath against my ear, and she whispered the thing she'd been keeping all that time. I wish I had done this sooner. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't want the moment to end. Outside, a car slowed at the curb, and Renee's key found the lock, 20 minutes to the second, and still I kept them closed a heartbeat longer, letting the song fill the room she'd brought back to life. It had waited 7 years to be heard, and so had she. Nothing happened fast after that, and I've come to believe that's the whole point of the good things. They don't arrive. They accumulate. We didn't fall into each other that first night. We finished the room, is what we did. Renee came in with the primer and the groceries and took one look at the two of us standing there with a record playing and a whole conversation still hanging in the air. And she set the bags down very slowly and said, "Well, it's about time," and went to the kitchen and left us to it. Later she told me she'd wanted to shove the two of us into a room together for the better part of 7 years and had settled for the long game instead. Took the two of you 7 years and one broken shelf, she said. I should charge a fee. What we did was learn each other in the ordinary hours. Camille started staying past dark, not for the work anymore, just to stay. I started cooking again. The first night I did it, I stood in the kitchen and realized I'd forgotten how much of me lived in that room. The knife work, the sound of onions going soft in a hot pan, the smell of garlic filling a house that had been holding its breath for the better part of a year. She sat on the counter while I cooked and told me about her day, and the record spun in the next room, and I understood that this, exactly this, was the thing I'd been missing without being able to name it. The 45 became ours. We played it most evenings, when the light went gold and long across the floor the way it had that first Saturday. It stopped being a thing she'd carried alone and became a thing we shared, which is maybe the best that can happen to anything you love in secret. that one day you get to love it out loud. I learned her in pieces, the way you're supposed to. That she hummed under her breath when she was concentrating, and had no idea she did it. That she took her coffee the same way I did, which felt like a small private joke the universe had been sitting on for 7 years. That she left a glass of water half finished on every surface she passed, a ring of condensation on the wood, and that I'd gone from never wiping those rings away after she left to leaving them because she was staying. The house filled up with the evidence of another person again, and instead of dreading it, I found I'd been starving for it. There were evenings we didn't talk at all. She'd read in the chair by the window, the one she'd turned toward the light on her second afternoon in my life, and I'd be at the counter with something on the stove, and the record would murmur in the next room, and I'd look up and see our 2 shadows thrown long across a wall we'd painted with our own hands. And I'd think, this is it. This is the whole thing. This ordinary gold-lit evening is what I almost missed. I never said any of that out loud. I didn't have to. She noticed things. She'd catch me looking and just smile, and I'd know she already knew. Bianca surfaced one more time. A message. Late one night. Some months in. I saw her name light up the screen and I felt, honestly, almost nothing, which told me everything I needed to know about how far I'd come. There'd been a time her name could take a room apart. Now it was just a name. I didn't open the message. I set the phone face down on the nightstand and I let it ring itself out into the dark. And in the morning I didn't think about it at all. That was the difference. In the end, between the man in the doorway who let every call slide to voicemail out of grief and the man who let one slide out of peace. Same gesture, opposite reasons. The house kept getting warmer, and this time I knew it wasn't the paint. A year went by. I can say that easily now. A year went by. But I want to be careful with it, because that year was made of 1,000 small evenings, each one ordinary, each one the thing itself. We put the last of the trim up in the spring. We planted something along the front walk that I can never remember the name of, and she always can. Summer came and the windows stood open and the record competed with the cicadas and lost, cheerfully. Fall came and we'd sit out on the porch I'd rebuilt, the one Bianca had walked across in her sharp heels. Except now it was just a porch, just ours, and the past had no more claim on it than the weather does. We had people over, actually had them over, filled the rooms with voices, and I'd catch her eye across a crowded kitchen and feel the same lift in my chest. I used to feel listening for her car, except now the car was already in the drive, and staying. There's a thing that happens with a house you restore. For a long time it's a project, a list of what's broken. And then one day you notice you've stopped seeing the list. You just live there. The house had crossed over into being a home so quietly I couldn't tell you the day it happened. Somewhere in that same stretch of time, so did we. On the anniversary of that Thursday, the one with the record and the 20 minutes and Renee's key in the lock, I put the 45 on and told Camille to close her eyes. She did, and she smiled before I'd said a word, because she knew this game now it was ours. I had something small in my pocket that I'd been carrying for a couple of weeks, waiting for a moment worthy of it. And I'd finally understood that the moment was just this one, the 2 of us, and the song and the gold light on a wall we'd painted together. I won't tell you every word I said. Some things you keep, but I'll tell you her eyes were wet and not spilling, the way they'd been the day she told me the truth. And I'll tell you the answer she gave was yes. Still off by a hair? She asked me once. Weeks later, catching me eyeing a shelf out of old habit. I looked around the room, at all of it, at the whole life that had assembled itself out of ordinary evenings while I wasn't watching. No, I said. Everything in this house is finally level. I've had a lot of time to think about the shape of it all, and what I keep coming back to is the difference between the 2 of them, and what each of them did with the very same truth, because it was the same truth. Bianca and Camille both knew, in the end, that Camille had loved me for 7 quiet years. Bianca took that truth and sharpened it into something meant to make me afraid, meant to turn a gift into a threat, meant to win me back by poisoning the one good thing in my life. She held the truth like a knife. Camille held the same truth like an old record she'd been keeping safe, and when the moment finally came, she didn't cut me with it. She turned it into a game, told me to close my eyes, and let the song do the rest. For years I believed the loudest person in the room was the one who wanted me most. Bianca was always the loudest, and I mistook the volume for love, the way a lot of us do. But it turned out the one who loved me longest had been standing quietly by the record player the whole time, patient in a way I didn't have the sense to recognize, waiting for me to close my eyes long enough to finally hear her. I almost missed her. That's the part that keeps me up some nights now, in the good way. I almost spent my life listening for the wrong car. So let me leave you with 2 questions. If you'd been me, would you have heard what she wasn't saying? Or would you have missed it the way I did for so long? And is there someone still standing quietly by your record player, right now, hoping you'll finally close your eyes? If this story moved you, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe for more, and tell me down in the comments, who did you love too quietly? And did you ever say it out loud?